Carter.
Okay. Well, Nancy, thank you so much. Thanks for setting this up and really bringing together all of you great folks to get to network and meet each other, because to me, I think that's probably the most important piece. The sessions are good, but networking and get to know each other is like the best. As Nancy said, my name is Sandy Carter. I am a vice president with Amazon Web Services. I've included here my Twitter handle, but you can also catch me on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. The main thing I wanted to do is I really want to connect with you guys afterwards, because I don't get to stay very long. And for me, like I said, the networking is so important. So either tweet at me or do Instagram at Sandy Carter Founder, or Facebook or LinkedIn or something, just so we can stay connected. Is that fair? Okay, so what I thought I would do today, based on Nancy's direction, is to give you a little bit of background about my career, and then I wanted to go into 3 career hacks. Does that sound good? I'm going to do it via hopefully a couple of different stories. So I wanted to first talk about my career, and I want your attention first to go to that treasure map, because I think that all of us think that ending up in the perfect career is like finding that amazing treasure. But instead of going like all different directions to find that treasure, we all think that we have to go straight up, right? And when you really think about someone's career, if you really stop and really analyze it, what you're going to find is that people go horizontal. They take jobs that they just love, or go to work for people they love and they think they can learn from, even though it's a horizontal move. In some cases, people will go what is perceived as a step down. I have a really dear friend of mine who took a role at a company, and at the time for her, it was a step down. This was several years ago, so it was called a little company called Microsoft. And people criticized her because she had these big offers at McKinsey and Bain and Goldman Sachs, but she decided to go with this little company up in Redmond called Microsoft, and now she's retired at like 45 and doing really well. So you never know, like in your career, what is going up, what's going horizontal, or what might be perceived by others is going down that really isn't. So I want to give you kind of 3 lessons from what I've experienced in my career, and I'm going to go all the way back to when I was in college. For some of you guys, it might be even very recent. But for me, the interesting thing was, as I grew up, I wanted to be a doctor. That was my dream. In fact, I took emergency training classes. If anybody got hurt on the playground, I was there, Dr. Carter. I was helping in any capacity. I even did animals, and I was known as this girl is going to be a doctor. So I went to Duke University, great pre-med school. And in my sophomore year, we had to dissect a rat. But the rat was alive, so you had to cut it open. So they brought in all of these chemicals that they used to clean in a doctor's office, all these chemicals for doing the anesthetization. And guess what? It turns out that the second I smell them, not touch them, smell them, I pass out. And so I was talking to my advisor at Duke, and he was like, oh, surely there has to be like a pill or something you can take for that, right? I was like, I hope so. So I went to like 7 doctors, and as I was in their offices, I passed out about half the time. And it turns out that I could not be a doctor. Could you imagine going to a doctor, them walking in the room, you're telling them about what's going on, and then all of a sudden, the doctor passes out. Not very much in the earned trust capacity. But the really cool thing, and this is what happens a lot of times when we see something that looks like it's not a perfect choice, my advisor was not only a biotech advisor, which a lot of pre-meds had, he was also the head of the computer science department. So after I cried my eyes out for a day, because I knew I couldn't be pre-med anymore, he brought me in and said, have I got a great deal for you? I have a senior project that you can work on. You can do your senior thesis. And he was using computers to replace testing of chemicals on animals, so like makeups and stuff. That was my senior process. And I fell in love with computer science, and I graduated with a computer science and math degree. That changed the course of my life, which I thought was something that was devastating, turned out to be something really great. My second big pivot point was when I was trying to decide what to do about grad school. And my advisor, who I told you was phenomenal, right, because he got me into computer science, he thought that my future was PhD computer science. So he had encouraged me, apply to Carnegie Mellon, apply to MIT, go and get your PhD, right? Because he wanted me to be a doctor like he was. But I had one other professor who went to an MBA school, and he said, this is my prediction. I think in the future, a combination of business and tech will be phenomenal. Now remember, this is several years ago when people never really thought about things like that. So I applied to multiple schools. I ended up getting into MIT and Carnegie Mellon for a PhD in computer science. Went to my first meeting. It was 3 levels down in the basement. I went to interview with the guy who'd be my advisor. He would never look at me when he asked me a question. He was always looking like this. So he'd say, Sandy, what do you want to do? And I'd be like, hey, I'm here. Can you see me? Wasn't a good fit. So I went on and got my MBA, which turned out to be another really big point for my future, because now having an MBA and tech is really a great combination to have. So I tell you these stories just to say that as you're going through choices and deciding what you want to do, sometimes you're forced into a choice that may not seem great, that may be devastating for you, but as you start to go in that direction, if you keep your head up and you keep moving and grooving, things will turn around and eventually you'll end up in the right place. So what I wanted to do is, based on my career, which I've worked now for about 2 decades, there's 3 things that I think are really important that I wanted to share with you. The first one is act like an open API. You can see the tech still embeds everything I do. Second, to win the hard sell, you have to show your soft side. And the third one is build lifelong relationships. So I want to walk you through each of these, and I'd like to do that with a couple of stories if I could. So the first one. So I love social media. I love to, if you go out and check me out, you'll see I blog on LinkedIn and I tweet all the time. And I was telling Nancy I was supposed to arrive at 10 a.m., but we were stuck on the runway for 2 hours, so I was tweeting up a storm, right? And so I was getting ready to go to India, and what did I do? I tweeted, I'm headed to India. I'm going to keynote at this conference. So I took the flight over. It was about a 22-hour flight. I was living in New York at the time. And I land and I go check in. It's 11 p.m. at night. So I got mascara dripping down my face. I'm super tired. And I go check in, and the first thing that happens is the general manager of the hotel comes over to me and he says, the group that was meeting you got too big. So I put them in a conference room down the way. I was like, oh, okay. So I was thinking, oh, my work team came. I told them not to come. You know, it's 11 p.m. at night. I'll go say hi after I check in, and then I'm going to go to sleep because I have to keynote at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. So after I checked in, I go down to the room, and there's Bollywood music. People are dancing. This is not my team. So I shut the door, and I went down to the general manager. I'm like, where is that group that you told me about? He's like, down there. So he took me down to the same room. I still remember it. People are Bollywood dancing, they're having a great time, great big like a party, like 150 people. And I'm like, this is not, there must be some mistake. So I go in, and I still remember this little guy comes running out, Sandy, how are your 2 daughters? I go, great, I do have 2 daughters. How is your one-eyed dog? I have a one-eyed dog. I'm like, she's doing great, I had just adopted her. My name is Anil. I am the president of the Social Media Club of Bombay. I said, oh, that's great, congratulations. And he goes, so I saw your tweet that you were coming to India. So I tried to call your office to see if you could come and speak to my social media club. They said, no, you were too busy. So I called my sister's brother's cousin's niece, and they told me that you were staying here. So we decided to show up. And then I said, oh, it shouldn't just be me and my family, it should be the whole club. So I emailed the entire social media club. And so literally 150 people from the Social Media Club of Bombay are sitting in this room. And I said, oh, okay, well, this is great, but I didn't know what I was supposed to do. He goes, and then people started moving away, and there was a projector set up in the middle of the floor. He goes, we want you to teach us how to use social media. So now it's like 11:30 p.m. at night. I'd flown 22 hours. I have mascara coming down my face. I know this because he took a selfie with me, and he posted it. And so he said, would you please teach us some social media? So at that moment, you have a couple choices, right? One, you could have the guy arrested because he stalked you on Twitter. Two, you could say, thank you so much, but I'm really tired. I just can't do it. Or three, you could say, you know what? I have a little bit of something I could share, my experiences. I'm going to do that. I'm going to act like an open API, and I'm going to share my knowledge. So I did. I pulled out my computer. I hadn't even gotten to my hotel room. I was there till 2 a.m. in the morning, talking about social media. I had a presentation on my computer. We just walked through it, and I ended. The next day, I get up to speak. Now, the Social Media Club of Bombay, this was a 2,000-person room, had bought 150 tickets to come and hear me speak. So they were there in the audience. So they introduced me. I come out on the stage. I do not say one word. The Social Media Club of Bombay stands up, starts cheering. The entire 2,000 people stand up and give me a standing ovation before I said one word. So what's the moral of the story? Well, the moral of the story is don't tweet before you go to India, ever. But I think the biggest moral of the story is if you have something to share, share it. A lot of people will say that knowledge is power, and therefore you protect that power. You don't share information. You're not open. You don't extend yourself. But I think the best way to have an impact is to share. I will tell you, just from that one little thing, my manager actually spoke after me, and he did not get a standing ovation. And he was like, I mean, he must have told this story like 1,000 times because he was so impressed that I stayed up till 2 a.m., had pictures taken with mascara running down my face, and really tried to help people that I did not know, truly did not know. So I think that if you open yourself up, it really has an impact on people. Do you guys agree? Okay, my second story that I wanted to share with you is another interesting one. So this was early on in my career, and I had been given a really big opportunity. And that was to manage a team of managers. So I was going to be a second line manager. And this team was not really very successful. And so they asked me, would you take on this team and help turn it around? And I thought, wow, this is my big break, right? Second line manager, this is going to be phenomenal. And so I said yes. Well, it turns out that all the managers, there were 7 of them, were all men. And they were all much older than I was. And so this is going to be a challenge. So I started working with the team, and I figured out pretty fast, this team is really good. They're super smart, but they don't know how to collaborate with each other. They don't know how to work together. They don't know how to communicate. So here's what I'm going to do. Every Monday, I'm going to put a quote on their desk. It's going to be specific for that person, something I think is really phenomenal about them. And we're going to talk about the quotes and about what we think is great about each of them. It's a good idea, right? I love quotes. So I said, okay, let's try this. So after about 3 weeks, I thought it was going so well. One of the guys on the team, he was 6'7", he says, I really need to talk to you. And I'm like, okay. This is when we still had offices. So he comes into my office and he shuts the door. I go, oh, sit down. He goes, oh no, this won't take but a moment. He goes, I just want to let you know, we hate the quotes. Stop it with the quotes. And I was like, okay, well, why? And he goes, they're too girly girl. And if you haven't noticed, you have a team of all men. And then he got up and he walked out. So I had a choice to make there, right? Doing quotes, you guys don't know me, but I do a lot of quotes. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll see I'll give a quote a day, or I'll find someone who has a great quote. I love quotes. I think they're very inspirational, very motivational. I also think that if you use them in the right way, it can bring people together to collaborate. Well, long story short, I did not stop my quotes. I kept going. Our team actually did phenomenal. That wasn't the only thing I did, but we really did really well. And in fact, that year, my company did a Manager of the Year award. I won Manager of the Year that year. But this one guy, 6'7", never thought he really liked me. I knew he hated my quotes. But 10 years later, I got invited to a retirement party. And guess what? It was for that guy. I thought, oh shoot, he's gonna poison me. Something's gonna happen at this retirement dinner. So I show up at the dinner, right? So I show up at the dinner, and his wife comes running up to me and she said, "Are you Sandy?" I'm like, oh yes. I said, "I know your husband hated my quotes, I know this." And she said, "What are you talking about?" "My husband loved your quotes." I said, "Really?" She goes, "Well, he didn't like them right at the first." But she said, after a while, he really started liking them. "Do you know that he got a shoebox and he has all of your quotes that you gave him in a shoebox? And in fact, one of his retirement presents was a laminated box from his kids so that he could put your quotes in there, because he said that they encouraged him throughout his career after you left being his manager." Really interesting, right? I know, I started crying. I was like, oh. I tell you that because as women, a lot of times we do stuff that shows our soft side. And I think a lot of advice that we're given is, don't do that. That shows your weakness. That shows that you're too empathetic. That means you're not a tough boss, because you're showing that side of yourself. And for me, what really did it for me was when he said, "That's too girly girl." As I thought about it that night, I said, that's what I am. I'm a girly girl. That's who I am. So if I don't do this and I'm not who I am, I will have given away too much to be successful. So I want to try to be successful in the way that I know how, which may be different than others, but I think it can work. And in the end it did, so I just want to encourage you guys not to try to transform into something that you're not to be successful, because in the long run, it will mean you're not successful because you're not really who you are. And I do think that the workforce needs a little bit more collaboration, a little bit more empathy in what people see around them as leadership. Make sense? Okay, I've got one more. Are these okay? With me? Okay. Okay, my third one is another interesting story. I went to this conference, and it was with one of our business partners. And as I walked in the room, there was a speaker that was going to speak, who was like 5 minutes away, and I noticed that nobody sat in the front row. And as a speaker, it's so great. I love having you guys here, right? Because I just draw energy from having people in the front row, except for these 4 people, these 4 empty seats right here. So I said, oh shoot, no one's sitting in the front row. I'm gonna go sit in the front row, and I'm gonna get my team, and we're gonna go sit in the front row. So I went and got my team, and we sat in the front row. And so as we were sitting there, the guy speaking was really good. I was like, oh shoot, I'm gonna take out my phone, and I'm gonna what? Tweet. And so I took out my phone, and I started tweeting, and the speaker kept staring at me, looking at me. And my team's like, he's getting mad. He's thinking that you're texting. He's thinking that you're doing email. You know, watch, just watch. So at the end of his presentation, he was up on a stage, a really high stage. He jumps off the stage and heads straight towards me. My team's gone. They leave me. And he comes up to me and he says, I saw you on the phone the whole time I was speaking. And I said, oh, I really was paying attention. I was tweeting out what you were saying, and really. And he goes, oh, I know. I was like, you do? He goes, yeah, come look. And at his screen, he had a social media dashboard. He was watching all the tweets and everything, his entire presentation, tweaking what he was saying as he was going along based on what was coming in. So my team left me, and they could have been there with me, right? But I thought it was really interesting because he was like, I really appreciate you doing that. And what's your name? And so his name is Jeffrey Gittimore. You guys know Jeffrey Gittimore? He's written more best-selling business books than any other person on the planet. He wrote the Little Red Book of Sales. Anybody read that? One of the most successful books ever, and he is now a co-creator of content with Dale Carnegie, the first and only time that Dale Carnegie has allowed other content to be placed into his classes. So really important. So anyway, after that, I decided, he had said a couple things, I thought I could help him out. So he had a son that had MS, and so I was sending him some information about that. And anyway, we got to really forming more of a lifelong relationship, not because I wanted something from him, but because I try to help people as we go along. And so then I wrote my first book. And one day I kind of put it up on LinkedIn. Hey, my first book's coming out. Well, guess what happened? Jeffrey Gittimore sent me a message back on LinkedIn, and he said, I'll write the foreword for you. I was like, really? He goes, yeah. He goes, people usually pay me $100,000 to do that, and that's true. He goes, but I'll do it for you for free. So that first book went on the New York Times bestseller list, translated into 7 languages, and still today, I believe that foreword, because basically everybody that had bought a book from him bought this book as well, really made an impact on my life. Now I tell you that not because of the book, but because the relationship. Think about how that relationship was formed. I sat in the front row. When my team deserted me, he came over and we started talking, and I just would do little things every once in a while. He would do little things once in a while, and then boom, he wrote a foreword of a book for me. I really encourage people to look at these relationships that could be lifelong versus transactional. In fact, I was reading an article today. It's in the Harvard Business Review. It's about how women network and what works well and what doesn't. And what works well is when you do it authentically and you're giving something without expecting something in return. Those are usually the relationships that you get something in return from. But they're lifelong. They're not something that just happens like at an event. A lot of times when I talk to, especially women, they'll expect to go to a networking event and then boom, something magical happens. But it doesn't happen that way. You have to really work at it and do it authentically to give back as you go along, forming those lifelong relationships. Does that make sense? So one of the reasons that I really believe this is important is because of, I believe that getting a diverse group together, and diversity to me isn't just male and female. Diversity is diversity of thought. So one of the teams that we had brought together really wasn't being innovative. And we thought, wow, this team, there's men, there's women, there's cultural diversity. I mean, there's all kinds of diversity you could ever think of on this team, but they're not producing the right number of new ideas. What's going on? Turns out the entire team had gone to the same school. And they had been trained in the same frameworks and the same ways to think. And so diversity doesn't just have to be men and women. It's so many different things. And when you have that diversity, you drive more market share, and you're more likely to capture new markets. And I think that's really important. I want to show you a couple of examples of this. So this is a friend of mine. Her name is Anina Nett. She's the model on the right-hand side. She was discovered at the age of 13. She's been on the cover of Vogue 5 different times. She's another one of my, sit in the front row and get to know somebody, she's another one of those people for me. Even though she was a model, what she really wanted to do is code. So she was discovered at 13. She'd gone out of a coding camp, gone out of Starbucks, that's where she was discovered, and then went back to her coding camp. So in between of sets and stuff, she would still code. When she got too old to model, which was about 24, seriously, she decided, I'm gonna take what I know, fashion with tech. So the dress on the right is actually a dress, it has IoT in it, so as you move, it changes and has color that comes out, different lights. Funny story, she initially set it up to trigger off your heartbeat, but as the models walked down the runway, they were nervous, right? So their heartbeat's beating really fast. So the lights are going like disco, right? So it was not a good scene. So she was able to pivot. But using a very diverse team, men and women from China, from India, all cultural diversities, they created this, this ring here, which is one of their best sellers now. And I forgot it. I meant put it on the table. I put lotion on. I forgot to put it back on. But it's so it's a safety ring. It's really pretty. So unlike one of those things that you hang around your neck, you know, that says "Help me, I've fallen, I can't get up." This is pretty. Something that my mom would wear, my grandmother would wear. And you touch it, you hold it down, and it will call for help. You can call either, you know, a friend that you have, or the police, or whoever is that person for you. I love this because here's a woman who's a CEO and founder of a startup here in San Francisco that's driving great ideas with this great diverse team that she has. And then the other example I wanted to show you is Redfin. Do you guys know Redfin? Yeah? Okay. They're based out of Seattle. What you may not know is their CTO is a woman. Her name is Bridget Fry. She is incredible. When she started, the tech team at Redfin was 4% women. And you know, they're split between here and Seattle. And so one of her missions was diversity. I want to figure out how we can drive diversity. So you know what she did? She's a technologist. And you know, in technology, when you have bugs in your code, you fill out a ticket and you fix them. So she got the CEO of Redfin to allow her to open a ticketing system for any bugs for diversity and inclusion that existed at Redfin. Cool idea, right? And so they now have 37% women in their tech arena that she manages. 37, they went from 4% to 37%. She actually got written up in Fast Company. I love it because this is one of the projects that they did. It's estimating the value of a house. Really interesting because they originally had started with, no offense, but an all-male team. When they tested out the algorithm using machine learning, it would predict, you know, your house is worth $600,000 today, $200,000 tomorrow, $1 million the next day. Does that sound like a good algorithm? No. So what she did is she came in, she really diversified it, not just in men and women, but she added data scientists, real estate agents, coders. She added a couple of anthropologists to the team. And they created this great algorithm, great way to predict the value of a home with this diverse team that now is considered the best estimate of your house. So if you're gonna sell your house, you ever wanna see what, this is the best place to go to look, is go on Redfin to look at it. Diversity is really helping to drive that. So I'm really, really proud of the fact that diversity can help drive some of these differences and can really help us in our businesses as well. So there's 4 takeaways that I want you guys to leave with. So one is act like an open API. You guys remember that story? India, don't tweet before you go to India. Tweet after you go. But make sure that you act as an open API. The second one, show your soft side. Remember the story about the shoebox and the quotes. I'm hoping that you guys will remember the stories, because a lot of times you won't remember the points, but you'll remember the story. Remember to be yourself, whoever that is. Third, build lifelong relationships, because those lifelong relationships are going to be what you have to grow your career, but more importantly, not just about your career, but about where you're going. One of my favorite quotes talks about when you're young, you really rate your success on your grades at school, right? When in reality, you should be rating how you're learning. How do you grasp that learning? When you get older in your career, a lot of times we rate how successful we are by how much money we make, right? In fact, I was on the plane today. There's 2 guys behind us, and they were debating taking a role based on the amount of money they would make. But in reality, what you should be basing your value on is those relationships that you have, right? Because that's really what's gonna stay with you. And then the 4th one is to reach back. One of my mentors, I used to work at IBM as well, his name was Ted Childs. He always used to tell me when we do a mentoring session, he goes, Sandy, I don't care what you take away from me except for one thing. And that is, no matter how high you go or where you go, always reach back and pull at least one person with you. Because if every person did that, think about how different the world would be. It would be a changed place. So take those away with you. And I want to end with this. I started with that map. Remember the treasure map? So one of my friends that I still have today from Duke, she actually went on to become an investment banker. But her real dream, her real vision was to be a mountain climber. So she ended up quitting her great job at Goldman Sachs and became a mountain climber. Very successful one. She led the first American team, all-female team, to climb to the top of Everest. She's now a great speaker too. If you're ever looking for a great speaker for an event, she's a phenomenal speaker. But we had dinner one night and she taught me this, which I thought was really interesting. She said, if you're gonna go to the top of the summit, you wanna reach the very top. You don't just start at the bottom and barrel your way up to the top. What you do is you go to your first peak and you stay there with your team. You get adjusted to the climate, you get adjusted to the team, you learn how things work, and then you actually go back down. Then you go to the second summit, do the same thing, and then you come back down, and then the third, and then finally you get to the top. Because if you went straight up to the top, you actually would die. You wouldn't be adjusted to the altitude. So think about that for your careers. You don't want to go straight to the top because you'll die. You don't tweet when you go to India because you'll get stalked. But what you want to do is make sure that you're enjoying the journey, that you're learning your team, that you're adjusting to the altitude, and that you're forming those lifelong relationships along the way. Thank you, guys.